Welcome to the Victor Special, brought to you by Yumping Amok. I'm Shipwreck Jones. I'll be your instructor for this class. Okay. Well, the good news is that this class is more down and dirty, quick and to the point. It's not not nearly as long as my previous class. Anyway, this is a production chain which you can copy and paste, turn into your own production chain. All right. Once again, you should kind of take this stuff with a grain of salt. I tried to make it like relative to other production chains, but a lot of this stuff can vary. So, but hopefully it'll give you an idea, a roundabout idea of the qualities of this chain. All right, let's talk about requirements. You will need Command Center Upgrades 5 on the character that is managing the factory worlds. Um, You do need a barren or temperate world with the radius not exceeding 2,830 kilometers. Fitting room is pretty tight, so you need to be below that. Power grid, the power grid usage of links can exceed 15 power grid. And that's also like with all your buildings jammed in together. You need your links to be as short as possible. For the Victor 3 factory planet, you can go much bigger. It's much easier to find suitable planets, and they don't have to be barren or temperate worlds. Barren and temperate are necessary to build HTPP, which you don't need with the Victor 3. You're going to need a minimum of 10 planets to be able to produce any P4, and 16 planets is the minimum if you want to be able to produce any PI that's in the game. All right. This is a chain that I'm personally using right now. I really like it. It's very productive. It's versatile. I can easily switch to different PIs depending on what I need. Um, Time investment, it's a little high. You're gonna have to be moving shit to, pick it up from your P1 specialist and move it to your factories. But it's really not that bad, especially if like you make a calculator as well for helping you to load your factory planets, which yeah, I mean I have a calculator set up in my spreadsheet for the yumpers who want to get a hold of it. But it's like you have to manually set it up. I've tried. I started working on a calculator, like a universal one. It started turning into a lot of work, so I put that way, way, way on the back burner. So anyway, um, yeah, it does have a high barrier to entry. CCU 5, lots of planets. There is another chain that I'm going to put up called the India Special, which it will provide like a stepping stone to the Victor 5 if you want to work towards that. But I'm also designing it to be a good standalone chain as well. But that'll be for a later video. All right, and here's like a visualization of how things work. So you have multiple P1 specialist planets, producing P1, preferably all 15 P1, 15 planets producing all 15 P1, and then you feed a factory planet with it. In high sec, you're probably only going to be able to support one factory planet, but in null, you can support two with this setup. Yeah, so this is kind of like more of what I just said. I did want to say though, obviously, it performs better outside of high sec, but it's still a good choice for high sec. Your planet specialization helps make up for lower quality planets. Your tax rates, they will cause you to have a higher overhead. But what I found is that you actually make more money over the same amount of time. You make less money per unit, but you make a hell of a lot more units. So it results in you making actually more money. It's a pretty good option for high sec, assuming you have the planets to support it, number of planets to support it. Okay. Scaling down, if you can't devote 15 planets to P1 production, you need to figure out beforehand what you want to produce and then look up the schematics for it. Say, these are the P1s that I need to make what I want to produce, and then set up your planets for that. If you're missing CCU5, don't have that on any characters, then you want to check out the India Special, which will have Factory Planet specifically designed for you. Scaling up, it's really easy to scale things up as you get more planets. Try and identify where your bottlenecks are and apply the planets to that. So if you have planets that are underproducing a certain P1, you could have a second planet producing it as well. If you're making way too much P1 for, two factory planets to handle, start adding more factory planets. All right, let's talk a little bit more about links. Um, you might think that link linked fitting requirements is determined by how far the buildings are spaced apart, which does play a role in it. But planet radius also plays a role. Like you could have two planets with different radii, and your buildings are sitting right next to each other on both planets. But the link fitting requirements on both those planets are different, and of course it scales with planet radii. And if you look at it, like the listed distance between buildings will actually go up as the radius increases. So that means, well, obviously you'll want lower radii planets for anything, any type of colony you're building, but it becomes critical for your factory planets. Uh, the way I design these, there is not a lot of overhead with the fitting room, so you definitely want to get planets that are below that threshold radii. All right, let's talk about the planet. So, uh, your first set of planets are your P1 specialists. This is what you're going to have the most of. They specialize in producing a single P1, obviously. And once again, these types of planets allow for maximum efficiency versus like P1 planets that are trying to produce like two or three PIs at a time, P1s at a time. Uh, Most of your buildings are going to be fit really close together to minimize the fitting cost of the links. Your one exception will be your ECU, which will wander chasing hotspots. You want to try and set up your ECU to overlap with multiple hotspots to slow their depletion. It helps with your yield and minimizes how much moving you need to do. Once again, that the golden ratio, quote unquote, is there is an actual golden ratio. This isn't it, but whatever. Yeah, 1 to 10 ECU to EH ratio. Uh, yeah, in high sec, you may end up having to trade some BIFs for a second ECU and more EHs just to make up for the low resource abundance. And you're going to be looking at about a 24 to 48 hour runtime. If you add additional storage facilities, you can go with longer run times, but it's going to eat into your yield. And you can see the buildings on the left, depending on your CCU upgrade skill level, you're going to be looking at like 8 to 11 BIFs. Command center upgraded all the way, one launch pad, then your ECU with 10 extractor heads coming off of it. And you should have a little bit of extra fitting room, and that fitting room is going to be devoted to the link running from the ECU to the rest of your colony. Okay, here's a picture of a P1 specialist. Um, as for the layout of the buildings of the colony, what I used to do, like I started doing it here and I stopped doing it in nullsec because it didn't work. But what I used to do in high sec was that I try and have my buildings like point out towards different groups of hotspots, and then wherever I place my ECU, I would have it connect to the nearest BIF, and then uh, the R0 would transit through those BIFs to get back to the launch pad. Uh, in nullsec, I kind of found it a pain in the ass to do because the amount of R0 you extract is actually more than the link can handle, so you have to upgrade it. And so if you do it the way I was doing in high sec, you have to upgrade every link between the BIFs and the launch pads. And then if you move your extractor control unit somewhere else, in order to reclaim that fitting room, you have to delete those upgraded links and then remake them. I just found it to be not be worth the time, so I just connect my ECU straight to my launch pads now. But that's something that you can do to save a little bit of fitting room in high sec for certain. Okay, so now let's talk about the factory planet. So first, we have the Victor 4. The way I got the name Victor means it requires Command Center upgrades 5, and the 4 means it can produce any PI up to P4, which is the highest you can go. Um, it allows for easy switching of production. No need to demolish or build new buildings. You just change the schematics and the routes. That can be time consuming, and you don't want to do it frequently. However, I do have like some color coded charts that can help make that job easier. Um, you want to set up your factory world. You're going to be importing and exporting. So ideally, you try and find a low tax rate POCO world to build on. Once again, yeah, and you're going to need to build it on a barren or a temperate world in order to build that HTPP. Cool thing about it, no expedited transfers required. It will run continuously. Just bring out more PI to it every day, P1 to it every day, and it'll never stop running. Um, yeah. And once again, when you look at radius and it being the correct planet type, you're looking at less than 10% of all planets will fit the bill. I think I found like it was actually around like 7% or so. So not a lot of planets can actually support this, but it shouldn't be that hard. 1 out of 10, isn't that hard to find, a planet that's suitable. Oh, and as for runtime, yeah, like I said before in the previous class, 24-hour runtime is short. It is daily, but it like with my P1 specialist, I do a 2-day runtime, so I only have to worry about that every other day. And then for my factory planets, loading them up, I have my calculator. It and my factory planets are in the same system, my home system. It only takes me about 10 minutes to do, so it's actually not that bad. Okay, so here's the basic colony layout. In the center you have the HTPP, and then it's flanked by the 2 launch pads, and the AIFs go out from that. If you set it up exactly like I have, then you can use my color-coded charts to help you set up your schematics and routes. But you can set it up however you want. Main thing to be mindful of is you don't want the the PI from too many AIFs being routed through the same link. So here, like no link has the PI of more than 3 AIFs being routed through it, and that's just to avoid overloading them. Uh, it'll eat up it. You'll have to end up having to upgrade them, and then and that'll eat into your fitting room, and you don't have a lot of wiggle room to play with. I actually don't know what would be the max amount of PI that you could route through P1. You could route through a link. Um, Here I did 3. I don't know what you can go up to. I haven't checked into that, but it's something to be mindful of. So when it comes to routing, I route everything to and from the launch pads. I never route straight to buildings. Uh, you want to end up losing with the way it's set up. You want to end up losing any PI, but I like to do it just for like error checking. So I can easily, once I set up my routing, I can easily click on my launch pads, check out the routes, and then count the number of routes that are there that are incoming of each type or outgoing, just as a measure to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. Uh, you don't have to worry about the launch pads becoming full because of volume reduction. Once again, there is one exception, building P4 1320 directly from P3 and P1, but it's not a problem with this setup. So and do be mindful if you are counting routes on your launch pads, you can create duplicate routes. You know, the same PI routed to the same AIF twice. So just be mindful of that. Okay, now before we get into the different configurations, uh, different configurations will have idling AIFs, and so you have options what you can do with them. You can just let them idle. You can demolish them to add additional storage facilities. Um, it's a better choice if you're not planning on changing configurations for a while. Um, You can also use those buildings to produce secondary products. It will reduce your runtime and make loading them more complicated, but it'll never reduce your runtime less than 24 hours. So you're still looking at dealing with them once per day. Anyway, what you can do with them, one idling AIF can be used to produce P2. If you have three of them, you can produce 1.5 units of P3107 per hour, and basically you're producing three every 2 hours is like how it would work out. Four AIFs would produce 1.5 P3 160 per hour. And of course, the HTPP will idle whenever you're not doing P4 production. Okay, so the first setup, simplest, this tool for P2 production. Um, you know, the input would be 1,920 units of P1 total. Will produce 120 units of P2 per hour. Your max runtime is going to be 27 hours. Uh, and here's a picture of, I mean, this is pretty simple. This would be all producing the same P2. You can, of course, mix it up, have half of them producing one type of P2, the other half producing another type of P2, or whatever you want. Uh, I tend to like to keep things even, so I would do, like 24 and 24 all producing one type, or 12 and 12, or 8, 8 and 8. I don't know. That's just what I would do. All right, P3107. So, yeah, you're going to have 18 AIFs are going to be producing the P2 necessary for the five P3107 AIFs. Four of them are going to run full time. One of them is only going to run every other hour. Um, Max runtime 36 hours. Your input's going to be 1,440 total units of P1, and it's going to produce 13.5 units of P3107 per hour. Okay, and so here's my little color-coded configuration chart for P3107. So purple, of course, is actually building the P3107, and then the blues and light blues are producing the P2 necessary to feed them. And I made a little flow chart for it while things were still simple, just to kind of help people visualize what's going on. Um, So like the white and the green PI, and don't ask me why I made it left to right instead of right to left, but yeah, those are being produced on your P1 specialist planets. You'll export it and import it to your factory planet, and that'll turn that P1 into P2, and then finally into P3, and then you export it, and do whatever you want with it. Okay, so once again, here's the features, the input, output of the planet. I'm not going to go into as much detail with this stuff now. Um, you're looking, it will produce 9P3 160 per hour. And so here's once again the color coded chart for it. So I really like these charts. They help making setting them up a lot easier. So what I do is when I'm setting up my routes and my schematics, I'll have this open on a second screen. Okay, this is a P3 107 and P3 160 hybrid configuration. So like basically half the colony produces P3107, and about half, is actually slightly more than half, will produce P3160. And you'll produce 6 of each. So here you can see the color-coded configuration chart for it. And I like this setup just because no AIFs idle, only the HTPP, which is used in P4 production. So I think it's a really productive setup. I do like it. All right, now we're getting into the P4s. So this one's the easiest to make, and you can see all the details for it. It produces one P4 1320 per hour. And here once again is our little color-coded chart. So, and yeah, you can see it's starting to get a little complicated here. Okay, and I include a little flow chart to help you visualize what's going on here. Um, I actually use these to help design my factory planet. So, I mean, you may want to use it to design your own. All right, so the P4 1920 configuration. Uh, Here, your HTPP will only run, uh, it'll idle for an hour, then run for 3 hours, then it'll idle for an hour, and so on. So that's why I say it produces 0.75 units of P4 1920 per hour. So, and here once again the color coded chart. And once again, the visualization of what's going on. So the M, that's basically what's missing from the planet. You don't have enough AIFs to support, your HTTP running continuously. So it runs 3/4 of the time. Out of the purple AIFs, like the left one runs continuously, the right one runs half the time. All right, and now we got the P4 2880. Um, a note on this one, it runs one half, the HTPP runs half the time. That gives you 0.5 P4 2880 per hour. Is it's kind of low. One thing you can do, like if you're in nullsec and you have a second factory planet, is you can have that second factory planet producing the other half of the P3 that you need, and then import it to this planet. And it will increase your taxes. You have extra import export taxes, but it can keep that HTPP running full time and give you a full 1 unit of P4 2880 per hour. So, and once again, here's the schematics for it. It's getting crazy. So, but this is the worst one. And here's our flow chart again. The red X's are the AIFs that are missing from the planet, and the yellow X's, they're present, but there's no point in running them because you have no P2 feeding them. Okay, now here's the second factory planet that I use in this chain. This is the Victor 3. It's basically a Victor 4 without the HTPP. So it loses the ability to do P4 production, but the benefit of it is that it can be built on planets with a larger radii. And in fact, you can go up to about 12 kilometers is what I estimated as the upper limit of the size. Um, yeah, and there I say, you might want to test that. I use my own formula that I derived, so you might want to test it just to make sure before you like you can plop down your command center, upgrade it, and start placing buildings, but don't hit the submit button. And if it doesn't work, you're out one command center versus a command center plus $11 million for building the dang colony. Anyway, it's a good choice, if you already have a Victor 4 taking care of your P4 needs, or you want it to supplement your Victor 4, like it's feeding the other half of the P3 that the Victor 4 needs for running the P4 2880 configuration. Okay. For the Victor 3, I used the same layout as the Victor 4, just so I could use the same color-coded diagrams for setting up my schematics and routing. It is suboptimal because I have an extra long link connecting the two launch pads, but I had the extra fitting room, so I didn't have to worry about it. If you're building close to the 12-kilometer radius upper limit for this planet, then you probably have to do your links a little bit differently just so you don't run out of fitting room. And yeah, everything else is the same number of AIFs and launch pads, and just use the same configuration diagrams for building P2 and P3. And here's a Victor 4 in action. And that's it. That's everything for the class. Hopefully, that gives you everything you need to set up your own Victor special. My next class, I will do the India special, which is basically a scaled down version of the Victor special. You'd only need Command Center Upgrades 4 to be able to do it. And the way I'm designing it, well, of course, I want it to be good as a standalone chain, but I'm also designing it so that you can easily scale it up. So once you get Command Center Upgrades 5, you add in the extra buildings and you have a full-fledged, Victor Special. Anyway, that's it for the class. Yumping Amok is recruiting. Check out our in-game corp ad or join our in-game recruitment channel, Yumping in Public. See you next time.